I'm really excited to be here today. I think the theme of Open Access Week this year, which is community over commercialisation, is fabulous timing for the launch of our new open access policy, which is designed to do exactly that. It's to make our research more open, so as many people as possible can have access to it, and to, I guess, push back a little bit on some of the tactics that commercial academic publishers have as they try to funnel our research into paid outlets. So just a bit of background. So the university, we've been spruiking open access and advocating for open access, and we've had an open access repository for, I'm going to say, close to 20 years. And we've had an open access guideline, not a policy, since 2015. That guideline was last reviewed in 2020. The guidelines always encouraged or recommended that researchers make their research open access. A lot has happened in the sector and in the open access environment and publishing environment since then. So we've seen a lot of support for immediate open access, and immediate is a really key word when I'm speaking here today, from global government agencies. And for example, the US government released the Nelson Memorandum, which advocates for exactly that. The Australian Chief Scientist, Cathy Foley, when she came into her role, she announced that open access for all Australian research outputs would be a priority for her tenure. And then we've seen a lot of the funders, including the NHMRC in Australia, now say that if they fund your research, you must make your publications open access immediately on publication, no embargoes. And what usually happens is if the NHMRC does something, the ARC follows, or vice versa. So I think we can see that from the ARC shortly. From a library perspective, there's been a real move from subscriptions where we just pay to access material to what we call read and publish agreements. So that means when we subscribe to a journal, we're also paying for our researchers to publish open access in those journals. And we've also seen some very strong open access policies developed in other Australian universities. Internally, we've also had a renewed focus on academic excellence and rankings. And one of the things that impacts our institutional rankings is the number of citations to our research outputs. We also have written aging. We love Nova, the platform that we have, but it's currently not really fit for purpose to really push through open access at a speedy pace, I'm going to say. A lot of manual processes there. So we're currently in a process where we're looking at getting new infrastructure, which will help us. And so when we were developing the policy, which has taken a good 18 months, it was, do we get a new platform first or do we go with the policy? We've ended up with the policy first. I don't know how easy it is to see that. This is from a report that Debbie Booth, our Research and Scholarly Communication Advisor, did earlier this year. It's available on the library's library latest SharePoint site, which really outlines the state of open access at the University of Newcastle for the last 5 years. So 2022 is the last year where we have a full view of what our way looked like. You know, if we look at sort of the number of open access articles up here, we're traveling okay. But when we look at the percentage of open access articles that we produce every year, we're actually lagging behind the sector. So I think we're ranked 25th out of 38. And really we want to be up there a bit closer to the front, because the higher our percentage of open access, the more our community has access to the research of the university. And if we think of it, I guess, from a quality perspective or a excellence perspective, the other table here, the quality indicators, and I'll encourage everyone to go and look at that, and we'll share access to that report so you can get more context about that. But basically it says, when you make your publications open access, your citation rates lift, and they lift very much. So lots of reasons why we have strengthened that guideline, and turned it into a policy. As I said, it's been an 18-month process, but there's been lots of consultation. So what's changed? The most important thing now is, rather than saying it'd be really nice if you make your peer-reviewed publication open access, and your librarians come around and say, yeah, this will be a good thing, the university is actually now saying you must make certain publications open access. And those types of publications are your peer-reviewed research articles and peer-reviewed conference papers. We're also asking you, where you publish in a non-open access journal, that instead of signing your copyright away and letting the journal and the publisher let you tell you what you can do with your work, that you license them to publish your work, but that you retain certain rights. And there's wording in that policy that helps you to have that conversation with publishers, and your research liaison librarians can also help you with that. We've also added more information around non-traditional research outputs and research data, which were not in the previous guideline. Again, not a mandate, but really you should be making those two things as open as you possibly can. And also recommendations to apply open licenses on your work. We have the Indigenous Cultural and Intellectual Policy Protocol, which was released, I'm going to say late last year or early this year. And there is a statement in there that recognises that outputs containing Indigenous cultural knowledge may not be suitable for open access. So they're the key changes, with the number one change being, or the two biggest changes being those first two at the top. So you're probably saying, oh, okay, I need to make sure I'm publishing open access. Where can I do that? So I just want to remind you that we do have Nova, our open access repository. So where you can't publish in an open access journal, you are now enabled and empowered in the new policy to put a copy of your author accepted manuscript into the repository. We also now have those 12 read and publish agreements, which means that you can publish in around 7,800 journals, and growing. Every year we will sign up to new agreements. And there's also a university article processing charge fund, which will pay for open access fees in certain quality journals. I just wanted to share these two clauses here. So when I was talking earlier around saying you want to retain some rights and asserting the right to share your work, that's just the wording around what you need to do. And there's actually a statement there that you can use. So basically it's an addendum to an agreement with a publisher that says, yes, you can publish my work. Yes, you own that final beautiful version, but I would still like to be able to deposit a copy in my institutional repository, my manuscript, as soon as it's published. So the policy is effective from the 18th of September 2023, which means it's in force now. It's not retrospective, so we're not asking you to go back and make old publications open access. Now, Mark said mandate. We use the word must. We don't have a big stick we're going to come around and beat you with if you don't make your publications open access. But the idea behind strengthening it and using that language is that we want open access to be the norm, because it's good for you as a researcher, it's good for us as an institution, and it's good for the community and the world that we live in. There's no penalty for non-compliance. And we have 4 research liaison librarians. They can advise on the policy, any questions you have around that licensing and copyright and your publishing options. And we can also come out and talk at schools and research groups. We're here to help you to manage your work as you learn to work with the policy. And I think that might be